talked about.
Thank you.
And what I did, I was an airborne ranger in the Army for 18 years. And one of our assignments at times were to try to penetrate the security around some of these secret bases.
Like Area 51?
Yes, exactly like Area 51.
In other words, you would be given the assignment of trying, kind of like a computer hacker tries to get into the Pentagon by their permission. You, permission, would try to break in and breach their security.
Yes, this is right.
Cool. How did you do?
Oh, well, we had about a 40% success rate the first time.
You've got to be kidding.
No, it
That's
was
horrible. You mean to say
it was pretty sloppy.
So, in other words, an enemy agent, if that's what you were, would have at least a 40% chance
of breaking in. Okay, now you got to remember, this was like 15 years ago.
Yes.
Okay, the last time we tried, which was like 5 years ago,
yes,
we were successful about 9% of the time. They've stepped up their security immensely. They have ground sensors, and you talk about and scopes, well, they got some that will probably put this one to shame.
Oh, I know.
And they really stepped it up. Now, for a base that's not there,
Area 51?
Right.
Not there.
Not supposed to be there. They got some amazing security measures there.
I know. They have ground sensors. They have, as you point out, night vision. They have helicopters with infrared and heat sensing.
That's right.
And there are people. They try, and they've made it in. A few of them, and a lot of them, of course, sit in jails.
Yeah, because it's a federal offense.
That's right. Now, there's two ways of looking at Area 51. One is that our country has a right to a really, really secret place where we develop things like the F-117, that kind of thing.
That's right. The F-117, the B-1B, the B-1C.
Sure. But I mean, all of that is now like the Model T compared to what we've got.
Exactly. And
then there's one other little factor, and this is where a lot of people begin to say, I want to know more, and that is, they think there's been extraterrestrial contact. They think that technology has been transferred to the U.S. government because of some kind of deal with them, and that technology is being tested at Area 51, and there is some evidence to indicate that might be so.
There's a lot of...
Call toll-free, 1-800-618-8255. No, wait a minute. Hold it. You cannot say that word on the air. Okay, that is one of the 7 deadly words the FCC doesn't like. So you saw some weird fertilizer. You saw some weird poop.
Yeah.
Just modify it a little bit, all right.
Just as soon as you ask what it might be, I mean, you're immediately taken off of any assignment you might be on. And we'll ship to someplace like Anchorage, Alaska.
Anchorage isn't that bad. Now, Thule was not one of the favorite tourist sites. But look, let me ask you what you saw. What did you see? Can you tell us?
Well, you hear people talking about particle beam and electromagnetic beam.
That's right.
And lasers. And they say the only way you can run a powerful enough laser to take down an aircraft or maybe a missile, it would have to be, huge blocks, blocks long. And some of the things I've seen,
no,
I can't say exactly, okay, because then I'd be in breach of a government contract. But take it from me, they're getting this technology from someplace.
All right. Even though you can't give us precise details, you saw particle beam weapons. That's right.
At least that's what I thought they was. I mean, you take something 100 yards down the range and you point a box at it and hit a button and it explodes, okay?
And just where do you think this technology came from?
Well, I'm with you. Now, I believe that there are a lot of UFOs, ETs, whatever you want to call them. Okay? I mean, I've seen some weird stuff in my life.
You're not necessarily with me because I didn't say that's where I was. I said that's what a lot of people believe.
Well,
that is an important distinction. And I think it's indeed possible. Now, as you may have heard, I had my own sighting of a triangular craft that came 150 feet over my head. Just on a night like this, when the moon was just about full, blotted out the moon, stars. This was a craft that defied gravity, without question. And so either we have many generations of aircraft development that we know nothing about. That's a big story if we have anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity, yeah.
Or it was one of theirs.
You know, I'm betting that it's one of theirs, because I've seen a ship something like you was talking about. I drive a truck at night, which is how I ended up listening to you.
And that's also how you saw it, you know, because most people, do you know most people never look up?
Well, when you drive at night, you tend to look at the stars quite a bit.
That's right.
And I was watching this light. I just figured it was, a regular airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, unless we have figured out a way to make the G-forces negligible, or the laws of physics not apply, it was going in a straight line, and immediately, did a 90-degree turn and was going in 90 degrees.
You know what that would do to a human being?
Yeah,
It'd be jellified.
That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, my friend. Hello there.
This is a good topic you got on here tonight.
Well, it's different. Can you add to it?
Oh, pretty good. I'm in Seattle.
Yes.
And I've been in and out of Edwards and Palmdale since 1967. With many of the companies that work in those locations.
Oh, there's a lot that goes on at Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
And Palmdale.
Well, in 1989 and 90, I worked on that airplane that came out of Palmdale, which they only built 22 of.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of airplanes, sir?
The one that radar can't see and it's supposed to be invisible.
Well, you mean the stealth?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with composite structures?
I certainly am. Composite materials.
Together?
Yeah, composite materials that don't reflect radar signals, or if they do, they reflect them away from the point of origin.
Correct.
Sure. I know something about that.
On the B-2, when they put the wings to the fuselage, they have these gaps between the composite, the regular airspace, which they have to fill to get the radar signature out.
Right.
It's infiltrated. Well, they were making these titanium shims to put in there, and we thought that the shims were just regular, normal grade titanium. And after we did some of our own little testing on the bits and pieces that were laying around,
yes,
we found out that it was a aluminum titanium composite.
Really?
Yeah, which really, to this day, I don't think even exists.
Aluminum titanium.
Aluminum titanium composite. That's those two metals. But here was the clicker. The bonding agent was a silk fabric, which you couldn't cut with a razor knife. It would actually dull a razor knife. You couldn't drill a hole in it.
You saw all this with your very two eyes, right?
Yeah, I had the clearance. So, I was eligible to see it.
How are you able to now safely talk about it without fear of, Men in Black or whatever?
I'll take my chances, but I'm pretty certain that your phone is secure tonight. And
it is.
And they can't do any tracing. I'm pretty sure that my phone's been bugged because of all the projects that I've worked on that were in the black world.
Why have you decided to talk about this? Particularly about specific composites. You're saying things I've never heard before.
Well, you're talking about Area 51, and everybody knows what goes on over there. And in my world, Area 51 doesn't exist or never existed. And
in my world, it's just over the mountain to the.
Yeah, I know exactly where you are, and I know we're in relationship to Area 51 is.
Yes.
In your world, it exists. In my world, I don't know what you're talking about.
I see.
But this composite material came from Area 51. They were the only people who could work it. They were the only ones who could build it, and it was kept under armed travel between the two places.
I know an attorney. This is something that eventually is going to be public, if it is not already, and it is to some degree, who is representing a number of workers at Area 51 who worked with very exotic materials, including claim they got sick. Now, the government is trying very hard not to allow this lawsuit to proceed because it would open up a can of alien worms, or worse, at Area 51. Are you aware of that?
Well, I've heard of it. NPR ran a series on that not too long ago.
Are you at all concerned that you might have been exposed to something that might make you sick?
Well, over the years, I probably have exposed to some exotic stuff, but it's nothing. I'm still alive today, and I'm not sick, so I'm not going to worry about it.
One leg has not become shorter than the other or something.
If you keep your mouth shut, you play by their rules, you get to fly some of the strangest airplanes in the world. Work on them, look at them.
Did you ever get to actually fly?
Well, I'm a licensed pilot, and we've talked before on that topic. Yes, there are some airplanes that have been flown that radar can't even see.
And you have flown in them?
Yeah. And you're aware of that stuff.
What was it? Of course I am. What was it?
Well, I'll tell you, give you an example. It happened in the summer of 90.
Okay.
1990. We were taking off from Palmdale. Okay?
Yes.
We had two F-15s on our wingtips, and the tower cleared the two F-15s to take off. They couldn't see us. And when we were airborne, we were joined by something else and something else. And
something else and something else.
And something else.
Undescribed.
Undescribed. And we headed out over the Pacific. Okay?
Okay.
We got 200 miles off. Russian aircraft met us because they knew we were coming.
Russian aircraft?
Russian aircraft knew we were coming. Okay?
Now that implies, wait a minute, that's 1990. That implies cooperation between the U.S. and the and Russia.
No, there was no cooperation. They were just dogging us to see what we were flying.
Ah.
They knew the two F-18s and these two other aircraft and the 14s had left, and they just met up because they knew what the procedures were.
What's it like riding in an aircraft like that?
I've flown so many arts, it's just like riding in another airplane. And it's just some weird stuff out there.
Mm-hmm. Well,
one of these days, maybe it'll all come to light.
Perhaps so. One of these days, maybe it will. All right, thanks a million.
No problem, Marty.
You take care. That was as much as I could drag out of you. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Very good, thanks. How are you? Fine.
Well, I don't directly work for a government agency, but over the past 25 years have worked for companies that are under contract to the government during the Star Wars era.
That will do.
And that I was thinking of two things in particular that are kind of interesting because they lead to things that are showing up now up in the skies and things like that. One of them is in the 70s, there was a relationship between the company that I worked for and the government in working on ion propulsion. And in southern Ohio, they had a large proving ground that was set up. They would buy an entire mountain and they would run power to the site. And for, I guess it was almost 7 years, it was a combination military and private installation. And that about every 10 or 15 days, as soon as they could get it working, they would fire up the engines and see what they could get out of it and try to figure out how they worked.
In other words, back engineer it.
Yes. Because essentially they didn't have any model to work from. Anyone who worked on the project was basically brought in to say, well, try to improve upon it and try to see if you can figure out how to make it useful. And that none of us were allowed to really work with anyone else closely. You had small little nested groups and you could work on your projects, but there was no real open communication, so it wasn't apparent until after the fact. In fact, as I think about it now, it was probably rather obvious, but I didn't think about it at the time, that no one knew how it worked.
What did you actually see?
What I saw was essentially the frame and mountings with ion propulsion engines or motors or...
No, slow up now. The what mountings?
The frames and the mounting so that it could be potentially put on a device. These things aren't terribly large, and they work on a rather basic principle once you figure out what it is they're trying to do. Simply put, and without saying too much, They take the space that is directly around the object and they make it so that it appears solid for just a very brief instant, and then it can push against it in very small increments.
Ooh, that's intriguing. We're talking here about a propulsion system.
Yes, and that it's worked on, it requires a fair amount of energy to do it, but it's not impossible by any means. In fact, over the past couple of years, they've made real progress with batteries like hydrogen cells that are putting a small thing, something the size of a car, can have about 15 kilowatts of electricity, which is more than enough to run an ion propulsion system. And those things would run, in a very amusing sense, flying cars and things of that nature. But it's not subject to the usual laws of, the way projectile style things like jets work. These things can kind of nudge themselves around in any direction, and once they get moving, particularly outside the atmosphere, once they get moving, they're just kind of on the way.
Boy, I've been really looking forward to flying cars.
I have too. I've always enjoyed the sort of like late 40s, early 50s view of the future because it always seemed really intriguing when I was young. And I thought, well, this is what the future's bound to be. And then I found myself in the 70s working on these things thinking, boy, I'm stupid here. I can't catch up with what all these other people have designed and I don't even know how it works. And then later on in my life, I realized nobody knew how it worked. We were all pretty much going blind.
Well, I used to have a little Geo Metro, and I had a fellow up in Alaska who promised to send me a unit that was going to propel my Geo Metro into the air. I've been looking forward to that. Still hasn't shown up.
Well, I think a really large slingshot actually could do that.
Yeah, maybe a catapult, huh?
Now, the other thing, another company that I had worked for that was actually into the Reagan administration with the Star Wars program.
Yes.
The way it worked when you actually joined the company was that to prove that you could actually work in their environment, they would bring you into a room that had a whole bunch of stuff. And they would say, choose something here, define what it is, explain how you think it works, and see if you can do something with it. And they would give you about 2 weeks. If they spec'd you out and thought that you were actually capable of working for them, they would put a fair amount of time into testing you.
Did they do that with you?
Yes.
And what did they put you in with?
Well, basically, a lot of things that I couldn't identify, but one thing that I was able to make use of, I didn't know what it was at the time, but what they ended up incorporating into the Star Wars project were traveling wave tubes.
Oh, yes.
And essentially, they really didn't have a good handle on them. They could manufacture them based on on the template, so you could have as many of them as you wanted if you wanted to work on it. And they were coming out of the factory at about $80,000 a piece.
Yeah, traveling wave tubes are used, I believe, in modern telecommunications satellite technology.
Exactly, and they have a lot of different purposes. For instance, they can be used in navigation at extremely high speeds. Well, the funny thing about traveling wave tubes also is that that's the technology that also goes behind the pulsed beam weapons that you're seeing in the military private installations. Mm-hmm. That it really is a sophisticated way of modulating a pulsed beam that is pretty much just outside the X-ray band, but it captures it real well.
Have you seen the STS-50 video?
Yes, I have.
Have you?
Yes.
What in God's name did we see emanate from the ground toward space in that video? I mean, that was legitimate STS video emanate from the ground on the outside of the shuttle, zoomed in on a city. I mean, it was obviously intentional that whoever was operating the camera from the ground specifically wanted to see something from that city. And there was this incredible flash that moved obviously at the speed of light into space. And they got that. It took it. I've seen the video. Then they panned back again. So they were observing some kind of experiment on the ground.
Well, essentially what they saw was a craft, and any craft that uses ion propulsion that is in a mode where it's actually preparing to leave the atmosphere, when it leaves actually wherever it happens to be parked, if they intend to use it to leave the atmosphere, it leaves rather abruptly. It disrupts all of the area around it as far as the way it looks optically.
I'm sure it does.
And that it actually sort of, for lack of a better term, in layman's terms, it would smear the space around it, so that it makes it very hard to define what it would be. It moves at between 22 and 25,000 miles an hour when it actually is in that mode.
That would be, I think, I'm trying to recall what escape velocity is, but it's that or a little bit lower.
Right. And in this case, or in the case of that video, that was just a fluke. I don't think they intended ever to have that photographed.
Boy, you never know it by looking at the video because, I mean, they had a pan of a great part of the globe. You could see a part of the coastline, and you could see them zoom in on a specific city, and then they sat there and they waited, and you saw this sudden flash go up. And either, I have no idea what it was, but obviously they expected it to occur.
Well, the funny thing is, in all of these situations, is that there have always been a steady stream of leaks that come out. And in one form or another, for instance, I don't consider what I'm doing right now to be divulging anything, and I don't think anyone in the different agencies could care about what I'm saying because,
Well, you may find out about that later, too.
I was going to say, you'll come visit me in jail, right?
You'll send you a file on the cake or something.
But I think that in the case of that film, it's also an example of a good leak, or in other cases, the ineptitude of people in upper administration. And I've always been amazed at how, for instance, you don't see people just shooting at their feet and walking into doorways and things like that because they're pretty stupid in other strategic senses. And you'll find that in an agency where they're supposed to be maintaining very, very strict protocol, that some people will pick up a cell phone that's a regular good old cell phone and, oh, I got to call home, honey, I've got to go to that private installation or whatever. And I'm just appalled at times when I see that.
Well, I sure appreciate your telling us what you have, and I hope you remain free.
Thank you.
Take care, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'm just fine. You're going to have to yell at us. You're not very loud.
Okay, just the Area 51 line, right?
Well, they all are tonight. Area 51 or government employees, one of the two.
Yes, I've penetrated Area 51.
Oh, come on.
No, it's kind of a stupid story, actually. Me and some of my friends were having like a keg party up on Freedom Ridge.
Now, Freedom Ridge is an area that overlooks 51.
Yes.
So you were having a keg party, which means you had a bunch of beer up there, right?
A whole lot of beer.
A whole lot of beer.
Yes.
So you were totally scorched on Freedom Ridge above Area 51. Now, right away, you know this is a bad mix, right?
Not at the time I didn't, but I do now.
Mm-hmm. What precisely occurred?
Well, most of my friends were passed out, and I still awake, so I decided to take a walk. And I kind of, in a sense, crossed over into Area 51.
You kind of crossed over into Area 51?
Yes, I stumbled over the border.
You stumbled into Area 51?
Yes.
You staggered into Area 51?
Yes, you can say that.
I just did. And they, no doubt, came and collected your butt.
Yes.
And then what?
And they took me to the base.
To the base?
Yes.
Now, you see, normally, most people arrested at the perimeter or inside Area 51 are turned over to the local sheriff there and thrown in the county pokey, but you were taken to inside the area itself.
Yes, I was.
Did you happen to see anything unusual while you were there?
No, they had a hood over my head.
A hood?
Yes. So I couldn't see anything.
Were you allowed one phone call?
No.
No.
They told me I had no right, that I was on protected ground, and my rights not matter to them.
So the Constitution ends where the Area 51 gate begins?
Yes.
Well, in your condition, you probably couldn't argue very much. So what did they do with you?
Well, I remember driving through the desert because it was bumpy and stuff.
It would be bumpy.
Yes, and then we hit a paved road, and it was real smooth. Then I remember them dragging me out and taking me down several flights of stairs.
Yes.
And I was taken to a room, no windows, nothing, just a single desk and two chairs. And there was two doors at the door, two at the back of the room, and two behind me.
Right.
And there was a man, I don't know if he was like in charge of everything else, but he was asking me questions, why I was there, who I worked for and all this.
Who you worked for?
Yes.
And did you tell him, look, we just were having a kegger up here?
I guess he got the general picture when I breathed on him. I made him get drunk off my breath.
Threw chunks all over his floor?
No.
No?
They kept me there for about 3 days.
3 days?
Yes. They took me down to the sick bay.
Well, all right, that follows. But I mean, surely you were cured of whatever ailed you in at least 24 hours. Why didn't they release you? And what happened during the next 2 days?
They interrogated me some more.
Now that's amazing. And then finally, what did they do? Put you in a vehicle and drive you out to the perimeter and say, get out of here?
Yes. Once I did that, they told me never to say anything about this again.
And so, of course, now calling a national talk show, you're keeping that promise.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, by the way, were there any, in other words, if you talked about this whole thing, did they threaten you?
Ellen said, you better not talk about this, because this is a big deal.
I know it is a big deal. All right, thank you very much. There you have it. That's what can happen. There's a little example for you if you do happen to stumble in any condition into Area 51.
What about President Kennedy's assassination?
Well, there are a lot of Men in Black occurrences that are centered around the Kennedy assassination. Apparently, on one of the films taken of the motorcade, there is a man in black with a black cape and some old-fashioned hat standing right there at the motorcade. I mean, perhaps it's just a coincidence. There's another case that is perhaps even more interesting, and that is of a fellow named Castillo, who was apprehended in the late 1960s in the Philippines, apparently involved in an assassination attempt on Marcos. Now, when he was apprehended, the Philippine police or Secret Service or whatever they were used a truth drug on him, at which time Castillo came out with this story that apparently he was a multiple personality disorder, and he had like 4 or more discrete personalities, each with a name, each with an identity, and in fact, I believe he was carrying a number of different ID cards as well. It's a wild story in itself. But the payoff on it was that he believed that he had been involved in an assassination attempt on the president in 63, and that his controller had been a man in black who drove a black Cadillac, who had pasty skin and so forth. So that's probably the best thing I know in terms of the Kennedy assassination.
All right. What do we know about what the Men in Black have actually done? For example, are the vast majority of the cases simple intimidation? And it's really not simple if you're intimidated. Or do we know instances where Men in Black, beyond the Dr. Hopkins story, have killed?
I don't know of any instances where a man in black killed anyone, but there are a lot of truly sinister stories from the old days that, like I said, involve these sort of witchcraft elements. Even without some of the dramatizations that the Men in Black sometimes do, these guys are bad enough to fool with.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, encountering what you seem to, let's get down to it. I mean, there are some cases that you obviously believe are the best stories or the best evidence or might be genuine. What would they be?
Well, I don't know. There are many good cases. One of the most interesting one that always kind of sticks in my craw happened to a Dr. Hopkins in Maine in 1976. And he had been hypnotically regressing an alleged UFO abductee. And he was met by a man in black who was bald, had dead white skin, and no lips.
the lips were simulated with lipstick.
Oh,
This man in black discussed the UFO abduction case that the doctor was digging into in a monotone. He sounded like a robot. And then he apparently used ESP. He said, doctor, you have a dime and a penny in your pocket. The doctor reached in, and that's what he did have in his pocket. The man in the black told him to hold the penny in his open hand, and as the doctor looked at the penny, it turned silver, then blue, and then it slowly dematerialized, and there was no chance for sleight of hand or legerdemain. The doctor was holding this and looking close while it slowly dematerialized. Now, Ben Black asked Dr. Hopkins if he knew another famous UFO abductee, actually Barney Hill.
Oh, yes.
He had recently died from a heart attack, and Hopkins responded that he did. And the man in black told him with no heart attack that had taken Barney Hill, but the same thing that happened to Barney Hill's heart that had happened to that penny in the doctor's hand. And
Wow. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we are at a break point. Back to Jim Keith. Jim, the story of Dr. Hopkins is one of the coolest stories I've heard in a while, and it meshes with a lot of what we've been talking about. Would you please tell it one more time?
Sure. One of the reasons I like the Dr. Hopkins story is it wasn't anecdotal. When I received it, it was done in very much detail, and this detail was received from Dr. Hopkins' kids. And Hopkins was not talking after this happened, but it took place in Maine in 1976, and Hopkins had been doing some UFO research on his own and regressing an alleged UFO abductee when a man showed up at his doorstep, and this was a man in black. This guy was bald. He had very pasty white skin, and apparently he possessed no lips. The lips seemed to have been painted on with lipstick, and oddly enough, that's a detail that's repeated in other stories where the facial features are simulated.
Sounds almost like a mime.
Could be, or a clone. But this man in black talked about with the doctor about his research, and then he told the doctor that there was a dime and a penny in the doctor's pocket. He reached in, and that's what was there. The man in black instructed the doctor to take the penny in his open hand, and as the doctor looked at the penny, with no sleight of hand, this all took place quite slowly. It turned silver, then blue, and then it dematerialized. And the way that the doctor expressed that this had taken place was that he felt the absence of the weight of the penny on his hand. This man in black asked Hopkins if he'd ever heard of a well-known UFO abductee, Barney Hill, who had recently died from a heart attack. And Hopkins said that he had heard of Barney Hill. And the man in black informed Dr. Hopkins that in fact this was no heart attack, but the same thing had happened to Barney Hill's heart as had happened to the penny in Dr. Hopkins' hand, and that was the last that was ever involved in UFO research. He burned all of his tapes, got rid of all of his books, and like I said, the only reason we know about this is because his kids were willing to talk about it.
All right, it would be useful, and we may not know what exactly Dr. Hopkins was working on when this occurred.
In fact, I have the name of the abductee who Hopkins was hypnotically regressing, but I just don't have it at my fingertips. I believe it's in the book.
All right, so he was regressing somebody, and we can imagine that he was getting close to information that obviously they did not want out.
Right, and that's a familiar theme, of course, with the Men in Black, is that people find out about the secret of the UFOs, or they see a particularly spectacular sighting, and then they are encouraged in no uncertain terms to keep their mouths shut about it. Early UFO buffs who who edited a magazine about UFOs and ran a UFO organization.
Right.
He claimed that he was contacted by 3 men in black who told him the ultimate secret about UFOs, what they were really about, and then took him, initially he said that they were government and they told him to shut up about it. As time went on and as the dollar signs kind of arose in his back brain, the story got more convoluted and he went to the planet Kasich where everybody was naked and it was quite a joyride he had in the UFO. But originally it was just him being involved in UFOs and then 3 men in black contacting him. An entire closed optional planet? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And apparently this story had a good deal of currency among UFO buffs back then. But, Men in Black were really quite apparent right at the beginning of UFO research, around 47 through the early 50s. In fact, one of the earliest encounters that took place 13 days before the famous Kenneth Arnold encounter, where he saw the UFOs over, I think it was Mount Rainier, was the Maury Island affair, and that was the sighting of 3 donut-shaped UFOs that allegedly dropped metal and slag upon a boat near Tacoma. And after this took place, a man in black the following day contacted the leading witness, a man named Harold Dahl, and told him to keep his mouth shut about it. So it goes right back to the beginning of UFO research. We did say donut shape, didn't we? That's right. I bet that's something a cop would never report. All right, look, why don't we take some calls? I'd love it. And see what the audience has to say about all of this. Here we go. We'll just punch them up. You never know what you're going to get. I'm telling you. Hey, he's the man in black, eh? Are you a Canadian? Are you speaking to me? Yes. No, I'm not. You're not. But you say, hey, just like a Canadian does. Okay. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Jim Keith. Hi. Hello. Hi. Is my radio copy interference? No, I don't hear it. Okay. I would prefer you do not have it on in any form when you get on the air. Yes, okay. Should I turn it off? Yes, you should turn it on. All right, hold on. Absolutely. Everybody please do that. It's impossible to conduct a conversation otherwise. And then take order? Yes, Tim. I have a couple of things just to bring up. One is that it seems to me that in just reading ghost stories, like all throughout my life, yes, it seems like I've heard quite a few references actually to women in black, and usually they're purported to be some sort of ghost of a woman who's been deceased or something like that. But it does seem like women in black have appeared. And something else, the second thing that I'd like... A lot of them are witches, I suspect. Maybe. But another thing that I'd like to mention is the total preponderance throughout the British Isles of stories of black dogs. And their behavior in animal fashion, of course, is almost identical to what I've heard of the behavior of the men in black. And let us not forget black cats. Yes, but the black dogs are often so much more sinister. They'll appear, and you won't even be able to see their eyes or any part of their face, and then suddenly they'll just vanish in the mist, Yeah, I wouldn't like that. Yeah, and supposedly they're familiars of, witches or, necromancers or something like that, so maybe it's Men in Black or something similar. Fair comment, Jim? Good point, Tim. One thing that what you said reminded me was that trolls and fairies and witches originally were conceived of as being men and women in black. They were identical, but as time has gone by and with kind of fantasization, like for instance the work of Shakespeare, they've been turned into other things. For instance, fairies now have wings and are tiny, but originally witches and trolls and fairies were pretty much the same breed. And like I said, sometimes details drop out in my memory of my research, but now that I think about it, in Ireland, the fairies were men and women in black. Really? Yeah. That isn't the way I pictured a fairy in Ireland at all. Sure. So from what I understand, it was Shakespeare who turned our heads around about fairies and conceived of them as being kind of sprightly creatures. Okay. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Jim Keith. Good evening.
Hi, this is Chuck from Fresno.
Hi, Chuck.
When I was about 7 or 8 in 1970 or 71, I had no knowledge of Men in Black at that age, and I had a dream where 2 Men in Black came to my house, took me and my parents in a big black car, like a Lincoln Continental.
Really?
And they took us to a field that I had never been at that time. And later in my life, that was a place that I would go to. A friend's house was near there. And there was a corrugated metal warehouse.
Yeah.
Which in that area there actually was there was like a garage where this guy had all these old timber.
Yeah.
And in there it was very dark, very gothic looking. And there was a suit of armor in there. And then my father was taken to a chopping block. And the executioner was about to cut his head off with a really big axe. And that's all I remember. And my father's fine, and it was a dream.
It was a dream.
Yeah, but I had when I was younger than that, I was supposed to be 68. I had a sighting that I can almost say it was a dream, yet I think it was real. And I have to wonder if that's connected. And then in about 88, I had a UFO sighting that I know was real because I had somebody see it, but it was a light in the sky. So you can't see anything.
All right, well, then let's translate this to a question for Jim that's kind of goes down that alley. Jim, are a lot of the Men in Black sightings, how many of them are ambiguous in the sense that the person after it's over is not quite sure whether it was a dream or really happened?
As surprising as it might be, a minimal number. Most of the Men in Black sightings that I have run across tend to be the ones that people want to talk about or get into print or are very significant. And usually the kind of waking dream or the ambiguous ones don't really get communicated that much. So in fact, the number that has to do with dreaming in what I have dug up is minimal, pretty small. All right.
Western Rockies, you're on the air with Jim Keith. Hi.
Hello. All I want to say is that I'm in California. About 2 years ago, I suffered an episode of missing time. I was out after I got off work late at night, and I was stopped at a red light, and then the next thing I knew, I was 20 miles away, and an hour had passed. And at the time, I didn't know anything about missing time or anything like that. So I just kind of let it go. About a week later, I was out, and I stopped at a gas station, was getting gas. Again, it was at night. And I just remember this man being very tall and in a nice black suit, walked up to me and told me that I was going to give him a ride. And I said, no, I don't want to give you a ride. Why don't you ask another man for a ride? And he kept saying, no, you're going to give me a ride. So I quickly put my gas cap back on, went around and got in the driver's side of the car, and I thought the passenger side was locked, but when I got in the car, he was already in the car. And he pulled me in, and I started to scream, and he told me if I kept screaming that he would kill me, that he just wanted me to drive him around. So I proceeded to drive, and he kept telling me, nothing has happened to you. You won't remember anything. And I ran a stop sign, and he looked over at me and said, I know what you're trying to do, and if the police pull us over, I will immediately kill you. He just kept repeating, nothing happened to you. Nothing happened. You'll never tell anybody. Nothing happened. Then we got out in the middle of nowhere. I'm still shook up about this. I'm afraid as I talk about it. He got out of the car, and he looked at me, and I'll never forget. It's like his eyes weren't there, and he said, leave now, because I don't want to hurt you. I drove away. I started to cry after I got away from him, and I got it back into town, and I drove around town until I found a police officer. When the police officer got to me, I was broken up and told him, and the police were already looking for me because the clerk at the liquor store had seen me get in my car and heard him scream. They were looking for me in my car and a man in a black suit that had gotten in my car.
Holy smokes. Did they ever find you?
No. And it's a very small town that I live in. That's why I don't want to say where I'm at. They never found him. Never. He's never been seen again. But I've had instances, I won't even drive at night anymore, where a black automobile that came up behind me and been flashing its light, wanting me to pull over, seems like, and I just get home as fast as I can. I won't even drive anymore. I can't, this is actually been diagnosed with agoraphobia where I will not leave my house. I will not leave my house unless someone's with me.
I can't say that I blame you. Jim, have you ever heard a story like that? It sounds pretty classic. In fact, I've heard stories just like that. It related
Yeah, I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah, stories just like that, actually. All right, well, caller, I don't know what to tell you, but I might react as you have. I might not be going out a lot of times.
Do you think that he did this to me because of the episode of Missing Time?
Oh, now there's an intriguing question. Jim, well, your missing time can go both ways. It can be an anomalous event, a kind of a paranormal twisting of time, but at the same time, there are such things as government mind control programs, and there are, I believe Halpidol is the drug that specifically in overdose gives incidents of missing time. So lacking any further data, it's really hard. It's really hard to say if we're looking at paranormality or just massive arrogance of an agent. Or could it relate to the missing time incident? Sure.
Hello? Yeah, is this our dog?
It is indeed.
Am I on the air?
You're on the air, sir.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Well, listen, my name is Clay. I'm here in Las Vegas.
Okay. First time callers call area 702-727-1222.
I'm supposed to miss one.
I asked you not to give his last name, please.
Okay.
We're going
Well,
to...
his name is Charles. He was a Hollywood producer.
Okay.
Did about 456 documentaries for the U.S. government, including NASA.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, if you'll remember the shot where the Apollo breaks off and you have the ring of fire,
Yes.
that's his shot. You know that?
No kidding.
Yes. And Charles was a very good friend of mine, and he lived in Roswell, New Mexico, back in the 40s. His family owned a store at that time, a general store, and so they pretty much know everything that went down. And it definitely happened. There's no doubt about that. And Charles told me about this. And so, he's been involved in NASA as far as back in the 1943, I think, area, all the way back to, the Air Force's reluctance to let go of any information. But basically, he does know what happened, and it definitely did happen.
You're referring to the Roswell crash.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, there were 4 bodies that were frozen, and there are several more that were let go.
What do you mean, let go?
As far as there was negotiations, I think someone talked about earlier, we've had talks with the other people. The fact of the matter is that, this universe is not just us. There's no doubt. So it's just like when you talk to us in France, you have 2 different countries that are talking to each other. There's nothing, different than 2 worlds talking to each other. You know what I'm saying?
Of course I do. So you're saying that our discussions with other races and other beings are no different than the international communications Washington ambassadors.
It's true. Exactly. I mean,
you know for certain that all of this is going on.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. So, the bottom line is that it's definitely happening, and as a matter of fact, I've actually trademarked certain things that I've been told by the year 2000 may not be real appropriate, because...
Can you enlighten us?
Well, put it this way, it would be like trademarking Nazi beer after 1945. If you know what I'm saying by that. So, and I thought this would be, kind of a neat idea through patent attorneys, and basically I'm finding out that, by the year 2000, 2001, we may regret, exactly what's going on here. And so, I guess the point is this. As far as the space program goes, as far as
our continuing effort to try to, do something as far as other worlds are concerned, I think that whatever they need to do in order to keep us safe. And I think that, they're the most powerful entity in the world.
You mean, for example, any deal they have to make to keep us safe, even if it means sacrificing the few to save the many, to quote Spock?
No, you never sacrifice the freedom.
No, I said a few to save the many.
You put words in my mouth there.
No, I'm not. I'm asking. In other words, you said they will do what has to be done to protect us. That might include making some kind of deal.
Yeah, and keeping things kind of private and secret.
All right, sir.
Which they've done so far.
Appreciate the call. Thank you. The first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, I'm on the air.
You are on the air.
Is this one coming from your end or my end?
I beg your pardon?
Do you hear high-pitched whine on your end?
I do hear a high-pitched whine, yes.
I think I'm being traced up there, okay?
Look, you gotta always assume it's possible
What?
that you're being traced.
I'm not transmitting anything on this end.
Well, I'm certainly not on this end, so anyway, say what you want to say quick so you can't...
Real quick, try to shut me up, okay? The rays, this theory originate here on Earth around the end of the Jurassic period. There's a fairly vast separation of humans, close to humans to breed with the offspring is usually sterile. And they was simply made to go out to the planet, explore, and then come back. Because nobody wanted to take a 1,000, 200,000 year trip. And at the end of the Jurassic period, they trying to get rid of their overpopulated.
Yes.
And started making some genetically engineered plants, specifically peanuts, other lettuces, and like that. And it spread further, and they started taking nitrogen out of the air, decreasing the atmospheric pressure.
Yes.
Which a lot of things called the dinosaurs started dying off. And that and another thing with corn.
So you're saying they, the Greys, actually killed the dinosaurs?
Yes, because they're reducing the atmospheric pressure.
Well, I guess that would do it, wouldn't it?
And that's going to let it down. So if you look at the dinosaurs...
Listen, why are you worried they're tracing your call anyway? Yeah, I said, why are you worried they're tracing your call?
Well, I get the whine right here in my mind.
I know, but I mean, why are you worried?
Well,
You haven't said anything yet that they would care about.
Yeah.